Hello, my name is Colin Donagani and I'm here to present you my research on personality disorders. Specifically, I was looking at a comparison between histrionic personality disorder and narcissistic personality disorders. But before I get to that info, let me give you a bit of background information. So, what is personality? Personality is dominant modes of thinking, feeling, and behavior that characterizes an individual. It is a stable construct over time. There are multiple theories of personality, but for the purpose of this discussion, I have chosen to follow the five-factor model of personality. The five-factor model is a trait theory that assumes all people are born with certain inherent traits that develop over the course of a person's life. The traits this model includes are openness to experience, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and emotional stability, which was formerly known as neuroticism. Personality arises from the interaction between genes and environment. People have basic traits, the genetic contribution, that are then molded according to their environments. A personality disorder occurs when selected personality features are present to the point that a person develops maladaptive behaviors and psychological distress. Patients who live with personality disorders experience deeply ingrained pathological patterns of thoughts, feelings, and behaviors which pervade multiple domains of life. So, for example, family relationships, friendships, work, and education. Approximately 10 to 15% of the American population suffers from a personality disorder. The DSM-5 categorizes personality disorders in three distinct categories called clusters. Cluster A contains the odd or eccentric personality disorders. These disorders include paranoid, schizoid, and schizotypal personality disorders. Cluster B, which was formerly known as Axis 2, houses the dramatic, emotional, and/or erratic personality disorders. These disorders are antisocial, borderline, histrionic, and narcissistic personality disorders. It is this cluster in which I focus the discussion. The last cluster is Cluster C. The personality disorders in this cluster include the anxious and/or fretful personality disorders, such as avoidant, dependent, and obsessive-compulsive personality disorders. Research claims that Cluster B personality disorders share common features and that a person who possesses traits of a particular personality disorder prototype is likely to possess features from other personality disorders in the same cluster. There is a high comorbidity rate between all Cluster B personality disorders. So, specifically, histrionic personality disorder is characterized by behavioral presentation that is excessively dramatic and emotionally exhibitionistic. Moreover, patients with HPD, or histrionic personality disorder, are characterized by an intense need for affection, are self-centered, sexually seductive, displays rapidly shifting emotional states, and use vague and impressionistic language. Research estimates of prevalence rates of HPD between 0.4 to 3% in the general population and between 10 to 15% in clinical settings. Narcissistic personality disorder is characterized by a grandiose sense of self-importance, self-entitlement, and a preoccupation with fantasies of unlimited success and power. Patients with this personality disorder lack empathy towards others and pursue self-centered goals with the intention of gaining approval or admiration from others. As a result, these patients tend to be exploitive in their relationships with little to no regard for the other people with whom they interact. Prevalence rates of NPD, or narcissistic personality disorder, range between 0.3% in the general population to as high as 16% in the clinical populations. These prevalence rates are similar to the prevalence rates of histrionic personality disorder. So, of the research found for this investigation, the literature seemed to hint that all cluster B personality disorders share a common link with borderline personality disorder. Kramer, 1999, suggests that borderline personality disorder is a root disorder from which all other cluster B disorders follow. Torgensen and Company, 2008, suggests that the cluster B disorders share genetic commonalities, whereas environment does not seem to influence the development of these disorders. Now, the research literature that speaks to histrionic personality disorder and narcissistic personality disorder, particularly when comparing the two disorders, is scant. Indeed, the research, ironically, speaks to the scarcity of literature that examines the relationship between the two disorders. Interestingly, research argues that histrionic personality disorder has received the least amount of empirical attention and examination. Given the small amount of research in these fields, future directions are wide open. The one diagnostic criteria for histrionic personality disorder that caught my attention is vague and impressionistic language. So, for example, there is footage of a particular world leader who stated that he has the biggest and best words. I would like to explore the relationship between language and personality disorders. Could a restricted vocabulary that relies on vague and impressionistic language really indicate the presence of a personality disorder? Or do patients with particular psychological disorders present distinct patterns of language use? Thank you for listening to my presentation. I hope you enjoyed.